change. Christina walked home without difficulty, but the next day did not leave her bed, and it was a fortnight before she was able to be out of doors. When Ian and she met, her manner was not quite the same as before. She seemed a little timid. As she shook hands with him, her eyes fell, and when they looked up again as if ashamed of their involuntary retreat, her face was rosy. But the slight embarrassment disappeared as soon as they began to talk. No affectation or formality, however, took its place. In respect of Ian, her falseness was gone. The danger she had been in, and her deliverance through the voluntary sharing of it by Ian, had awaked the simpler, the real nature of the girl, hitherto buried in impressions and their responses. She had lived but as a mirror meant only to reflect the outer world. Something of an operative existence was at length beginning to appear in her. She was growing a woman, and the first stage in that growth is to become as a little child. The child, however, did not for some time show her face to any but Ian. In his presence, Christina had no longer self-assertion or wile. Without seeking his notice, she would yet manifest an almost childish willingness to please him. It was no sudden change. She had, ever since their adventure, been haunted, both awake and asleep, by his presence, and it had helped her to some discoveries regarding herself. And the more she grew real, the nearer, that is, that she came to being a person, the more she came under the influence of his truth, his reality. It is only through live relation to others that any individuality crystallizes. "You saved my life, Ian," she said one evening for the 10th time. "It pleased God you should live," answered Ian. "Then you really think," she returned, "that God interfered to save us?" "No, I do not. I don't think he ever interferes." "Mr. Sercombe says everything goes by law, and God never interferes. My father says he does interfere sometimes." "Would you say a woman interfered in the management of her own house? Can one be said to interfere where he is always at work? He is the necessity of the universe, ever and always doing the best that can be done, and especially for the individual for whose sake alone the cosmos exists. If we had been drowned, we should have given God thanks for saving us." "I do not understand you." "Should we not have given thanks to find ourselves lifted out of the cold, rushing waters in which we felt our strength slowly sinking?" "But you said drowned. How could we have thanked God for deliverance if we were drowned?" "What? Not when we found ourselves above the water, safe and well, and more alive than ever? Would it not be a dreadful thing to lie tossed for centuries under the sea waves to which the torrent had borne us? Ah, how few believe in a life beyond, a larger life, more awake, more earnest, more joyous than this." "Oh, I do, but that is not what one means by life. That is quite a different thing." "How do you make out that it is so different? If I am I, and you are you, how can it be very different? The root of things is individuality. Unity of idea and persistence depends on it. God is the one perfect individual, and while this world is his and that world is his, there can be no inconsistency, no violent difference between there and here." "Then you must thank God for everything. Thank him if you are drowned or burnt or anything." "Now you understand me. That is precisely what I mean." "Then I can never be good, for I could never bring myself to that." "You cannot bring yourself to it. No one could. But we must come to it. I believe we shall all be brought to it." "Never me. I should not wish it." "You do not wish it, but you may be brought to wish it, and without it the end of your being cannot be reached. No one, of course, could ever give thanks for what he did not know or feel as good, but what is good must come to be felt good. Can you suppose that Jesus at any time could not thank his Father for sending him into the world? You speak as if we and he were of the same kind. He and we are so entirely of the same kind that there is no bliss for him or for you or for me, but in being the loving, obedient child of the one Father. You frighten me. If I cannot get to heaven any other way than that, I shall never get there. You will get there, and you will get there that way and no other. If you could get there any other way, it would be to be miserable. Something tells me you speak the truth, but it is terrible. I do not like it. Naturally. She was on the point of crying. They were alone in the drawing room of the cottage, but his mother might enter any moment, and Ian said no more. It was not a drawing toward the things of peace that was at work in Christina. It was an urging, painful sense of separation from Ian. She had been conscious of some antipathy even toward him, so unlike were her feelings, thoughts, judgments to his. This feeling had changed to its opposite. A meeting with Ian was now to Christina the great event of day or week, but Ian, in love with the dead, never thought of danger to either. One morning she woke from a sound and dreamless sleep, and getting out of bed, drew aside the curtains, looked out, and then opened her window. It was a lovely spring morning. The birds were singing loud in the fast-greening shrubbery. A soft wind was blowing. It came to her and whispered something of which she understood only that it was both lovely and sad. The sun, but a little way up, was shining over hills and cone-shaped peaks, whose shadows, stretching eagerly westward, were yet ever shortening eastward. His light was gentle, warm, and humid, as if a little sorrowful, she thought, over his many dead children, that he must call forth so many more to the new life of the reviving year. Suddenly, as she gazed, the little clump of trees against the hillside stood as she had never seen it stand before, as if the sap in them were no longer colorless, but red with human life. Nature was alive with a presence she had never seen before. It was instinct with a meaning, an intent, a soul. The mountains stood against the sky as if reaching upward, knowing something, waiting for something. Over all was a glory. The change was far more wondrous than from winter to summer. It was not as if a dead body, but a dead soul had come alive. What could it mean? Had the new aspect come forth to answer this glow in her heart? Or was the glow in her heart the reflection of this new aspect of the world? She was ready to cry aloud, not with joy, not from her feeling of the beauty, but with a sensation almost hitherto unknown, therefore nameless. It was a new and marvelous interest in the world. A new sense of life in herself, of life in everything, a recognition of brother existence, a life contact with the universe, a conscious flash of the divine in her soul, a throb of the pure joy of being. She was nearer God than she had ever been before, but she did not know this, might never in this world know it. She understood nothing of what was going on in her, only felt it go on. It was not love of God that was moving in her. Yet she stood in her white dress like one risen from the grave, looking in sweet bliss on a new heaven and a new earth, made new by the new opening of her eyes. To save man or woman, the next thing to the love of God is the love of man or woman. Only let no man or woman mistake the love of love for love. She started, grew white, stood straight up, grew red as a sunset. Was it? Could it be? Is this love? She said to herself, and for minutes she hardly moved. It was love. Whether love was in her or not, she was in love, and it might get inside her. She hid her face in her hands and wept. With what opportunities I have had of studying, I do not say understanding, the human heart, I should not have expected such feeling from Christina, and she wondered at it herself. Till a child is awake, how tell his mood? Until a woman is awaked, how tell her nature? Who knows himself, and how then shall he know his neighbor? For who can know anything except on the supposition of its remaining the same? And the greatest change of all, next to being born again, is beginning to love. The very faculty of loving had been hitherto repressed in the soul of Christina, by poor education, by low family and social influences, by familiarity with the worship of riches, by vanity, and consequent hunger after the attentions of men. But now, at length, she was in love. At breakfast, though she was silent, she looked so well that her mother complimented her on her loveliness. Had she been more of a mother, she might have seen cause for anxiety in this fresh burgeoning of her beauty.